Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Breaking the Game podcast bonus content episode. Austin,
Yeah,
how we doing, man?
I'm good. I'm excited about this bonus content. We just got done. We just got done on here a little bit ago, and we're back at it again. We're gonna bring the people some extra stuff tonight, so I'm excited.
That's right, man. We hit the bathroom, not together, obviously. We don't even live in the same state, so whatever anybody was thinking, it ain't like that.
Right.
But we separately at the same time went to the restroom and got some refreshments, and we were back
Yes, we
at it
did.
because we've had so much happen over the past couple months, right, Austin?
Yeah, we've just been so busy lately. Joining the Dash Radio and bringing on Lee to do our draft recaps and having other guests to do season updates, off-season updates, and our season preview show. But we wanted to make sure and finish off our tiers, our rating system, our list of our top players in the NBA. So we wanted to bring that to you guys tonight. We figured we had a little time to get it done. We might as well get it out there for everybody before the season starts. So
That's right.
Should be a good time.
We wanted so much to try to put this on, now that we're on Dash Radio, Austin, we talked about this, we deliberated, the court was in session for a little bit, but we decided that it's important that we finish this project because, one, we started it. We don't like to, not finish projects that we put in, because we both put in a lot of time, effort, and energy into this, and we got through, 3-4 tiers. And we still have 4 more tiers that we want to bang out. We want to give this out for the people who listen and enjoy that. We got a lot of positive feedback on that. And it just so happens that we're at tier 4 for both of us, which are the bigger names. And this works out perfectly, Austin, because ESPN just put out their top 100. We didn't agree with that collectively as a network at Off the Ball Network. And we're going to go ahead and get into our tiers and talk about who rightfully should be where. We're not going to break this down numerically, so to speak, like ESPN did. Tiers are a lot easier, Austin. Why do you like tiers over, breaking it down numerically?
Well, it kind of eliminates the back and forth and the little annoying arguments about, is this guy 18th or 19th? Or, it kind of just lumps everybody into a category of, this is kind of how you can grade these guys. So, the last time we did this, my last tier was high-end starters, so that's a pretty easy grouping of guys. You can look at it and say, okay, these guys should be, they're starting on every team in the NBA. They should be, a pretty big time contributor. And I think it just kind of tells you a little bit more about, that group as a whole, more so than arguing, is Paul George 25th or 26th in the NBA, something like that, just for example. So I like the tiers a lot. I did rank them by numbers, but the tiers are the way we're going with it, and that's how we're doing it here. I like the tiers.
The tiers
we
are
didn't
good,
even name
man.
our tiers the same thing. So
we didn't, and because we wanted to roughly keep the same amount of players. That way, you didn't talk about 300 guys, and I talked about 50, or vice versa. We wanted to keep roughly the same amount of players, but we wanted to see how, Austin, you evaluate the game of basketball, how I evaluate the game of basketball, and how our viewers and listeners, agree, disagree with how we do it as well, right? But we worked it out. We're both at the same number of tiers. I think I have 10 players left remaining. I have roughly 39 players. How many do you have, Austin?
I have 29 players left in my 4 tiers that we have remaining.
Right. So, and we're at the sexy names. We're at the names that are, like the guys who aren't NBA nerds like we are, like your average person or your casual, NBA fan are going to be able to identify
everybody on this list. You should.
You should. If you claim to be an NBA fan, you should certainly know who these guys are. Austin, do you want me to start, or do you want to go ahead and start?
Why don't you go ahead and start us off, Steven? Let's hear what you got for your next tier.
All right. Well, so my tiers, and just to kind of let people know what my last tier was, that way they can kind of see the progression of the naming system that I developed. I went with demi stars on this one. The one prior to that were super starters, right? And I'll just go ahead and give the name of my third tier so this name makes sense. Tier 3 was stars, tier 5 or super starters. If those tiers had a baby, they would be demi stars. Like, that's how I look at this, right? So under demi stars, man, I had a tough time trying to draw a line. But again, the reason I like tiers, Austin, is that you don't have that bickering comment where, this guy should be above this guy. Like, okay, that's fine. I have them all in the same tier. They roughly give you the same skill set, what have you. So that's why I went with this. But underneath Demi Stars, I have Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell, Kristaps Porzingis, Trae Young, Pascal Siakam, Bradley Beal, Brandon Ingram, Russell Westbrook, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, CJ McCollum, DeMar DeRozan, TJ Warren, Kyle Lowry, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Karl Anthony Towns, Paul George, Klay Thompson, D'Angelo Russell, and Jamal Murray. Austin, those are the guys that I have. Again, there is no numerical order to this. I just kind of lumped them in there. I researched them all in a different order. So it's not that I let off with Devin Booker. I don't, necessarily think that he is better than Karl Anthony Towns. Oh, maybe I do, but like that wasn't my thought process and why I did it.
Right. And, you have a lot of guys in this tier where, we're going to be overlapping quite a bit. I heard quite a few names that I have on my list as well. So, that's interesting to see. I actually, several guys too, though I had a tier lower in the last year we did my high end starters, guys like Bradley Beal, Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, but they're right there. Pascal Siakam, I feel like a high end starter and a demi star are pretty fairly, easy to compare. My tier 4 is called All Stars, and I'll just go ahead and read mine off for you guys, and then we can kind of compare. I had Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Ja Morant, Blake Griffin, Devin Booker, Nikola Vucevic, Kyrie Irving, Russell Westbrook, Domantas Sabonis, Trae Young, and Karl Anthony Towns. So,
yeah, much shorter field than what I had. So your thoughts on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because this is a guy that I have as a demi-star, Austin, and I think a little bit of projection went into why. Well, I actually know that a little bit of projection went into why I had him where I have him, right? Because Chris Paul's gone, Dennis Schroeder is gone, even Billy Donovan is gone. So we're going to see a completely different system now with Diagnault being the head coach there. I'm glad that I remembered his name off the top of my head. That's Mark Diagnault, for those who don't know, that he's the new Oklahoma City head coach. So a little bit of a new system, definitely a new lineup. You're not going to have that 3-guard rotation that we were used to seeing. I think that he's going to benefit from playing underneath Chris Paul for a season, like a lot of other NBA guards do for their short time with them. And obviously his usage rate is going to go up, the amount of responsibility that he has, so on and so forth. What are your thoughts about Shai?
Definitely. Well, you called this one a while ago. You were the one saying you figured that those guys, Schroeder and Chris Paul would be out of there. I kind of figured one of the two would leave. I didn't think they'd get rid of both of them. But you proved me wrong. You hit the nail on the head. I had him down a couple at capable starters, but seeing now, like you said, the usage is going to go up. The opportunity is going to be there for him to be the guy on that team pretty much. So, I like where you put him. If I had to redo my list, he would definitely move up at least one tier. But no arguments here for me on that. I think you hit the nail on the head with just like you said, the amount of opportunity he's going to have with that team. So I think it's a young team with a young coach. He's a young up and coming star player, and I like where you have him for sure.
Excellent. Well, who's the guy that you're incredibly high on where you place them in this lineup? Is there a guy that just you for a fact that this is the tier that this guy plays in?
Well, I took some risks with my all-star naming the tier all-stars because I put a decent amount of guys in here that have never been all-stars. Zion Williamson, is he going to be an all-star NBA player? More than likely, unless he has a lot of injury problems. Blake Griffin, somebody that I have in this tier that is I'm pretty high on. I think we saw the best Blake Griffin that we've seen yet 2 years ago before he got injured. And if he can come back, at the very least, they've got a big time trade chip there. I think that they can get some value with in Detroit. So those are two guys. Trae Young has yet to be an all-star. Has Devin Booker made an all-star team yet?
That is a good question. I don't believe that he has.
I don't think he has.
So, I think that he may have been a rotation, like he may have been like an injury replacement this season. If I'm not mistaken. Let me look that up while you're talking about him.
For sure. So, there's a few guys on here that maybe haven't been all-stars yet or haven't quite played up to that caliber, but I do think that all of these guys are capable.
Yes, he made one all-star. Yes.
One all-star team. Okay, so he is on that list already. But, Sabonis just made the all-star team last year. Like I said, Ja Morant has yet to make an all-star team, but he's going to be there. Zion Williamson is going to be there. Whether or not it's this season, I don't know. But, they both seem to be kind of, generational talents at their positions. So, those are a couple of the guys that I just I threw in there, even though they hadn't made the all-star team yet. And I just felt like, I couldn't put them any lower. Brandon Ingram was kind of like the base for this tier for me. Not really, I didn't really go by the rating system by numbers, but he was kind of like the low end. Whereas, Karl Anthony Towns, Trae Young, I almost moved Trae Young into the next tier we're going to get to.
I flirted with that as well. Yeah.
I'm pretty high on Trae Young. I think he's poised to have a great year this year.
Absolutely. Now, did you have a guy that you put in here solely based on how they did in the playoffs this season? Was there a guy that jumped off in the playoffs that kind of definitively said, yep, this guy belongs to be in my tier 4?
Not really. Vucevic, maybe. Nikola Vucevic would probably be the one that, if I had to pick one, I would say, he kind of really showed me some stuff in the bubble and in that first round loss to the Bucks. I have him in my 4th tier. I like him a lot. He surprised me a little bit, but looking at this list, actually, the majority of these guys weren't on playoff teams. So Sabonis is, I think, the only other. Sabonis and Westbrook might be the only other two that even played in the playoffs, because Devin Booker didn't make it. Blake Griffin was hurt. Ja Morant's team, we saw what happened to them. Zion, they treated like he was made out of glass.
Yes.
Karl Anthony Towns' team didn't make the playoffs. Sabonis was hurt. Kyrie Irving was hurt. So really, Vucevic and Westbrook were the only two guys that I have in this list whose teams really even were in the playoffs. So, Vucevic definitely showed me some stuff in the bubble that I didn't expect to see. I knew he was a good player. I'd always kind of been fairly high on him, but I think definitely where I have him is maybe a little bit higher than a lot of people have ranked him. And I know for sure he's a lot higher on my list than he is on ESPN's list. So that was one that he kind of snuck in there just based off of, what have you done for me lately, kind of.
Okay, that's fair. Was there anybody on my list that kind of stood out to you that we hadn't brought up?
Not really. Like I said, the majority of your guys, I had Pascal Siakam, I had Donovan Mitchell, I had Bradley Beal, I had CJ McCollum, and Jamal Murray, all right on the cusp at the last tier we did. So, I don't know that there's really anybody else that we needed to cover too much on this one.
Okay, fair enough. All right. The next tier that we had, Austin, tier 3 for the both of us. What did you decide to name your tier? What's kind of your reasoning for that? And then if you want, you can go ahead and unveil the guys that you had there.
Yeah. So I named tier 3 all NBA level players, basically because I'm at, about 18 players left and there's 3 all NBA teams. So, any of these 18 guys, and really there's a few more that could be on this list too, that could have moved up, are guys that I think stand a good chance of making the all NBA teams this year. And I'll just run through who I have in this part of in this tier. I've got Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jokic, Rudy Gobert, Chris Paul, Joel Embiid, Bam Adebayo, Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum, and Chris Middleton. I think Chris Middleton might be one that you and I have a little bit different on our list.
Yeah, he was in my tier 4. Yeah, it wasn't like I had him way far out. I don't agree though that he is I don't look at him in that light, but I mean, it's certainly hard to argue with this past season kind of being that one outlying year where he certainly made that leap, right?
He's been a terrific shooter for a long time, and he did make a leap last year for sure. Yes. And I think we saw some issues in the bubble with Giannis bringing the ball down. I've talked about it. I've harped on it a lot. I think that offense looked better when Chris Middleton was kind of running the show a little bit, and it was flowing through him a little bit better than it was with Giannis. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that this year. But I mean, he came like 0.3% off of a 50-40-90 season, scoring over 20 points a game. I think anybody else, it's just his game's not real sexy. He doesn't really do anything that's really gonna wow you or gonna, make you jump off your seat or get up off your feet, but he's gonna make a lot of shots. He's gonna score a decent amount of points. And I think he's, squarely in the mix for that third team All NBA this year if he plays like he did last year.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what that dynamic looks like this year with adding a Drew Holiday, which is basically that same level of support player, in my opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's going to impact where he, because we made this list before the free agent acquisition. So looking back at that, do you still think that he's in that tier?
It may affect him a little bit, but ultimately, I don't think the usage at least is going to go up a ton from what it did with Eric Bledsoe and George Hill to Jrue Holiday. I do think maybe a little more efficient than Eric Bledsoe, but I don't know that he's going to take a whole lot of shots out of Chris Middleton's hands. He's like you said, he's a support player. He's not really a guy that you expect to kind of lead the offense or take a big chunk of those shots away from him. I think if anything, he may struggle a little bit from not having a legitimate true point guard kind of setting him up, but Giannis brought the ball down so much anyway that I don't know that that's even really going to affect him that much. I'm interested to hear what you think about Rudy Gobert, where I have him. I have him pretty high.
Yeah, you do. I have him as a super starter, which was tier 5 for me, right? So just a couple tiers down. And we also kind of did a little preliminary discussion on our top NBA 100, kind of in response to what ESPN just released. My biggest problem with Gobert is that he cannot create offense for himself at all. Like he just cannot do it, right? We've seen him get played off the floor. He's gotten a lot better, and I actually did have him as my defensive player of the year, front runner, right? Because he can switch on the guards, he can run them out there. But ideally, that's not the biggest part of his game. They run a lot of drop coverage in their defensive schemes there. So when you're looking at that aspect of Rudy Gobert's game, he's not a guy that can create for himself and certainly not for others on the offensive end. As great as a defensive player I think that he is, no handle. No post game, and he's a post guy, right? Like he's basically a lob threat and a great screen setter. So they don't even run any offense through him, like in the high pick and like a high elbow type situations or anything. That's why I have him so low. I certainly appreciate what you value in him as a defensive anchor and as one of the best defenders in the NBA. I love defense. Like if that was the biggest criteria, I would have Marcus Smart much higher in my, because I'm smitten with him, right? So I get the idea of why you have him this high.
Yeah, and this is a case where the advanced numbers just really are really in his favor. His traditional stats aren't probably good enough to be where I have him. I think top 15. 15 points a game is good, but it's not otherworldly. He does tend to be right at the top in field goal percentage in the entire league every year. Actually,
those are dunks, right?
Yeah, not last year, but the year before, he actually led the NBA in effective field goal percentage. But it's an interesting case because his effective field goal percentage and his actual field goal percentage were identical because he doesn't take threes. So that's kind of what that means. Offensively, he has gotten better. He's just his on-off numbers, basically when he's on the court versus when he's not on the court, are crazy for this Jazz team. Like they're they're on another level defensively when he's in there versus when he's not. And that's something that I kind of took into account a lot here. That and another advanced stat I kind of like, it's win shares, offensive and defensive win shares.
Like the win shares, yeah.
He was really high on defensive win shares like you would expect, but I believe I'm trying to find the actual the leaderboard, but he's at 6.7 offensive win shares, which I know is like top 10 in the NBA. So offensively, somehow, by these advanced numbers, I don't pretend to understand all of it to a T, but all of the advanced numbers say that he's better offensively than we see on the court, and he's obviously elite top level defender, on the defensive end. So that's, this was a case where maybe a little bit of the eye test doesn't pass, whereas the numbers kind of do.
I think a lot of that too, to the point that you're bringing up. I know that a lot of these advanced stats, field goal percentage plays a heavy dose in that, right? So because he is the beneficiary of, I mean, his usage rate is extremely low. I mean, like offensively, it's extremely low. I look at win shares as kind of like a almost at the same light as a plus minus. Long term, I don't value plus minus stats at all, but like in the flow of a game, I think that does have a good telltale on how they did for the night. Like the individual game plus minus doesn't, it gives you a better representation of the player overall, because what all of those stats have in common is that it's affected by the players that you have around you, right? So like Rudy Gobert, because he is such a dynamo on the defensive end, they can get away with putting out a couple of defensive deficient guards and forwards, so to speak, on there, and he can make up for that. He's what our buddy Couch Coach likes to say, he's the deodorant on that defense. He just makes up for a lack of other attributes that players just don't have. And so they can put in these offensive minded guys around him, and that offense kind of acts as the deodorant for all these advanced numbers that we see with Rudy Gobert, which you brought up. When we watch him play, we know that like he's gotten better. He used to be a 0 on the offensive end. Now he is probably about league average whenever you consider the league in its entirety and his ability to score at an NBA level. It's probably about average at his position.
Yeah, and one of the big things, like I said earlier, is his on-off numbers. That's something that I really like to look at. It's more of an easier way to kind of tell the actual game by game like value impact that they have on their team. And when he's not on the court, Utah gets outscored by 5 points per 100 possessions.
Well, their backup centers have been awful. Their backup centers have been awful.
So maybe Azubuike's not that bad of a pick for them. I don't know, but we'll see. But when he is on the court, they're +6. So it's an 11 points per 100 possession difference. That doesn't sound like much, but that's huge.
Yeah,
like that's a huge swing. That's basically saying without him, they're predicted to lose more often than not, and with him, they're predicted to win more often than not. So that's
his defense, right? Like that's that defense coming through.
And exactly, and it's just that I took that into account big time when I put him as high as I did. So
I definitely respect that, because I'm a big defensive guy too. So I definitely appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and let people hear your list before we just talk too much about mine.
No, that's okay. I like talking about Rudy Gobert. He's kind of he's the most polarizing guy, but the least popular polarizing guy, if that makes sense. Like he's the guy that like no one really talks about, because they just love his defense, and he's a 7-foot French guy. Who doesn't love a 7-foot French guy? So my tier 3, I named stars, right? I mentioned that earlier, because if they had a baby with the super starters at tier 5, they would make tier 4 demi stars, right? So under that stars tier, if you're ready, just to kind of compare your list, I have Kawhi Leonard, Kyrie Irving, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Chris Paul, Ben Simmons, Jason Tatum, Zion Williamson, and Ja Morant. And before I let you grill me, I just want to let you know, I actually had it pinned in my list, and originally I had Jason Tatum, Zion, and Ja Morant under the next tier, but I have a hard time believing that the progression, that they aren't at least stars in this league next season, Austin.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with anything that you said there. I have several of those guys on my list. I think Ja Morant and Zion were a couple guys that I had at the next tier down that could easily jump into this level too. Zion, for all we know, if he plays a whole season, could be an MVP candidate. I mean, who knows? I mean, he may be that good already.
We could be undervaluing him here, right?
Exactly. He didn't play a lot, but that wasn't necessarily any fault of his. He was just hurt, and then they didn't really give him a chance to get going after that. Jason Tatum is one that I love to hear that you have this high. I almost moved him up to my next tier. I
flirted with it too, man, to be honest.
Because I think he's going to kind of take a leap this year. I was listening to a lot of NBA radio. Tim Legler has him in his top 3 predicted to win the MVP this year. So, other guys that follow the NBA and that have played in the league are high on him too.
Legs can be a little bit bold with his predictions, though.
He can for sure. But there's nothing wrong with that. That's how you make a name for yourself a little bit. And, Jason Tatum, he's one of these guys that has gotten better year in and year out. He did have a little bit of a sophomore slump, but he went back to the drawing board.
Right?
Yeah. And, he went back to the drawing board, and he's one of these guys you see every year has more moves in his arsenal. He's added to his game. I'm excited to see what Ben Simmons does with Doc. Doc's the first coach he's had that hasn't been in his ear telling him, hey, you need to shoot threes. You need to shoot threes. You need to shoot threes.
And he's saying to run a pick and roll this season, right?
Right. And, I saw a pretty interesting quote about Ben Simmons is, everybody's talking about the James Harden going to Philly trade. Well, Ben Simmons is under 25 and he's an all NBA player.
Right.
NBA teams don't get rid of those guys. And I don't see any world where they're willing to part with Ben Simmons for James Harden. And I don't think they should. Kevin Durant, I have in this group. I actually have Kawhi Leonard a little bit higher than you. I have him in my next category.
Flirted with it.
But, I also feel like leadership is a big part of this. And it's a big part of being the guy. And he doesn't seem to have that piece of the equation. We've heard from his former coaches that he's not really a leader. We've heard from his teammates that he's not really a leader. And it's funny to me to see that, it's kind of seeming like Paul George is trying to take that leadership spot in LA with the Clippers. And I don't know. It feels forced. Every time he talks about it, it just feels like he's trying to say the right things and he's trying to give the right message. And it doesn't seem genuine. I don't know, but Kawhi's one that I had up a little bit higher, and I think Zion and Ja are a couple that I had a little bit lower. So nothing too big on your list again.
So Bam Adebayo as a star, are we buying that?
I have him at that level. I have him, in between Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, honestly, on my ratings. If we're going to go, space by space, I think Bam Adebayo is going to take another step, if anything. I don't think we're going to see a regression by any stretch of the imagination. I kind of think they've just scratched the surface of what he can be. I think first team All NBA in the next couple of years is something that he should be probably shooting for. And we saw he just got the same kind of extension that guys like Jason Tatum and Brandon Ingram are getting. Yep. And so, obviously Miami has faith in him. And, like we always say, if Miami thinks they're going to be good, they're probably going to be good. Usually they tend to pick the right guys.
They have their outliers, Dion Waiters, Hassan Whiteside, every once in a while they kind of take a risk.
I don't know. Hassan Whiteside was pretty good for a while. The game just kind of passed him up like overnight. You know what I mean? It just seemed like all of a sudden the big shot blocking centers like him that aren't really, floor spacers at all kind of just went by the wayside real quick, because once upon a time he was a max contract guy. He did
kind of in that Roy Hibbert aspect, right?
Yeah. And, Joel Embiid is another one that I people give so much grief over Joel Embiid and talk about how out of shape he is and how he doesn't care. Like, people don't dominate.
Blows my mind, yeah.
People don't dominate in the NBA if they don't care. It just doesn't happen. They said that about Shaquille O'Neal too, and I never understood it then either. Like, so you're telling me he needs to be more focused than the guy that just won 3 straight NBA titles. Like they would just always say, it just doesn't make sense. I don't know.
So I
will Joel Embiid.
Yeah, if you look at how he did the year prior, he averaged 27.5 points and 13 and a half rebounds. This season, he played actually 4 minutes less per game, which is probably why, right? But he, I'll say, only averaged 23 points and 11.5 rebounds. Yeah. And his block numbers went down. So compared to the year prior, he did take a step back, but he also played less. And that was, I said it before the season started, that Philadelphia team was not built for any sort of real logical success.
Right. The Lakers were a team that got big. They went big. They kind of had, everybody else went small. The Lakers kind of went big. Well, that kind of seems like what Philadelphia was trying to do, but they had no floor spacing at all.
It helps when you have the best player in the league and another top 5 guy.
right.
on your
That
team.
does help. That does help. And I think with a little bit of work and maybe just maybe having Doc's voice in the locker room instead of Brett Brown for all these years will kind of light a fire under him a little bit. I don't necessarily believe that Doc is the type of coach that worries about lighting a fire under guys. He doesn't seem like he's a real rah-rah type of guy. I think he's just...
Then why is his voice always so hoarse? Like, if he's not a rah-rah guy, like, he has no excuse to not be able to speak.
True. I do think he yells a lot. I don't know that he's much of a, a motivational speaker.
Passionate yeller.
I think he just is always yelling on the sideline. I think there's coaches that are just like that. And too, part of it's just his voice. I mean, even when he can talk, his voice is a little bit scratchy.
Almost kind of like that Dikembe Mutombo type.
Yeah, maybe a little bit like that. And I don't know. Mutombo's got a pretty legendary voice, but
yeah, like the Cookie Monster, right? So
yes, exactly. But everybody that you have in your tier here, I have either in this tier or at the very bottom of the next tier or at the very top of the tier before it. So Chris Paul is one that's on both our tiers that we didn't really talk about. I know you're high on Chris Paul. I love Chris Paul.
I love him too, man.
He's another guy that going back to what we did with Jurgen a couple episodes ago, he did his article comparing hockey players to wrestlers.
Shout out to Jurg, by the way. Jurg,
right?
If you're watching.
There you go. I think if you compare basketball players to wrestlers, Chris Paul is like a Chris Jericho, if you ask me.
Ooh, I like it.
He is good everywhere he goes. He's one of the guys, but he's never really the guy. He's never won a title.
Confident in his abilities.
Exactly. Very confident. Everywhere
Jericho
he goes.
has won his fair share of titles. The first ever, like the, what was it?
Unified World Heavyweight Champion. Yeah. Oh, I know. I just mean, he, even when we were talking about, the GOAT of wrestling, he kind of gets overlooked, and Chris Paul kind of gets overlooked in those talks of who the very best players in the league are. And he's a top 5 or at most 6 point guard of all time, so I like Chris Paul a lot. I had a hard time not putting him up a little bit higher, but I do think that when you see the name of my next tier, you'll see why I didn't put him up any higher. And I'm interested. Did you have Kevin Durant in this list?
At first, when I pinned him in, I had him in this list, but I bumped him up one. And do you want to? Well, let's just go ahead and transition to the next one.
Go right ahead.
I made this tier. I named it MVPs. I have 8 candidates: Luka Doncic, Steph Curry, James Harden, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Dame Lillard, Anthony Davis, and then the last one that I etched in, I pinned him out. I scratched him out of the tier below stars, wrote him in for MVPs. Tonight in this preseason game, I don't know if you caught any glimpses, but it's preseason, so grain of salt, recommended here. He looked like he was still able to do a little something on the court. So yeah, Kevin Durant in the 8 MVPs that I have listed here.
Okay, very nice, very nice. He's actually the last guy on my All NBA level that didn't make the cut for. We actually, believe it or not, everybody have named this tier the same. I have MVPs as well for this tier. We didn't set that up or anything. It's just how it went. And it's pretty much identical to your list. I've got Dame Lillard, Luka Doncic, Kawhi Leonard, Steph Curry, James Harden, Anthony Davis, and Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, you just added Kawhi and took out KD. It's like that was literally the only difference.
Yep. And, you can make a good argument for either of those guys. And KD did look good tonight. He looked pretty explosive. His first points were a dunk. So, he got up pretty nice and pretty easy for that. He looked
7 feet tall.
Yeah. He looked quick though. He did look fairly quick. So
absolutely.
It was nice to see him out there. I think Steph Curry got his first run a little bit tonight too. Of the preseason, he's back, and I think the Lakers and the Clippers are actually playing right now, aren't they?
That I do not know. I don't want.
Yes, they are. It's the Lakers are beating the Clippers 9-3 right now. So we've also got
without LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I don't know who's not playing for the Clippers, but I know that those two are not playing for the Lakers.
We've got a battle in the Eastern Conference. The Knicks and the Pistons are knotted up at 69 with 2 minutes to go in the third.
The battle for the bottom of the East.
Right. And the Rockets and the Bulls are currently playing right now. The Bulls are down 41-35 in the second quarter.
The Hawks battle of the teams that were dominant in the middle of the 90s.
Right, the 90s teams. And then the games that are already over, the Nets beat the Wizards 119 to 114, and the Hawks beat the Magic 116 to 107.
I would have loved to watch that game. Yeah,
there's your little preseason update for everybody. If you're watching us live or if you listen to this later, that's what's currently going on as we're going through our tiers.
You know what this means? He heard my comment on there, and we just talked about this guy earlier. You know what happens when you say something bad about the Knicks?
You know what happens, Steven.
It's coming. Oh boy, biting my nails. I'm waiting to see if he does it. I know he's watching.
Yep. Well, we'll keep going, and if he does, he does. You know, yes. And if he does, R.I.P. And I'll miss you, but I'll move on without you.
I mean, wow, ouch! So, I think that hurts more than what's coming from Chris.
I'll have 10 seconds of silence to commemorate you, and then we'll move on.
Wow.
So who's your top 3 for MVP? Since we're talking about MVPs right now, who you got as your top 3?
My top 3 for the MVPs. Well, I don't want to do that yet because we have, and Mo, it's coming. Let's just go ahead and do this, right? All right. So Mo, I hope you're listening. Chris, I hope you're listening. Before you fire me, let me just say this. Our tier 1, which we didn't reveal yet, was a tier that just consisted of one player for the both of us, right, Austin?
Yep. Mine's GOAT status, and I think yours is King of the World.
King of the World. Who's that?
LeBron
Keyword
James.
And there's King. That's LeBron James. Man's alone. And I'm a guy that has grown up to be extremely critical of LeBron James. Almost everything that he did, I criticized and made an argument against it. And it's just no way to live life, man. I'm just so tired of the weighted ring discussions. I'm just so tired of the LeBron James versus, MJ stuff. Shout out to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who I don't think gets enough credit for what he did in the league, by the way. But, Mo just says, now we're talking, right? So, anyway, back to Chris. You know what that means. I know it's coming. I don't think that you can put gifts on here, by the way, but I mean, if you can,
right. If he figures it out, he'll do it.
Yes, exactly. So, Austin, King of the World, LeBron James. I mean, what's he like? 36, about 37.
Year 18.
Year 18. We talked about this with Shannon Walsh on our last episode, who, she's the department lead for the NBA side of, Belly Up Sports.
Shout out Shannon.
Thanks for everything that you did for us. Looking forward to have you again if you're watching. Appreciate you, or listening. Appreciate you. But everybody criticized. Hang on a second, Steven. To hear you say that about LeBron, I'm astonished. Mo, we've talked about this so much, man. And here, hang on a second. I want to do something real quick, Austin. Okay. Just go ahead and kill some time
for sure. So I will give my top 3 for MVP since I asked you. I actually have finishing third, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think not Giannis, Luka Doncic. I have Luka Doncic as my number 3 for MVP candidates. Sorry, I was looking at the list and read it backwards. 2, I have LeBron James. I just think, he's going to be kind of hell-bent on getting one more MVP. But I actually have Steph Curry as my MVP pick for the year. And now this was a pick that I made way back before any of the injury to Klay Thompson or any of the other things that happened. But, if Steph can single-handedly kind of keep this team in the top 3 or 4 in the West, I think he's got the comeback storyline. He's got, he's won it before, which a lot of times is a good, precursor to MVP, winners. They tend to have, at this point in his career, he's not going to win his first, but he's already won 2. So he could very easily win it again. I think he's got the good storyline. I think his team is going to be good enough. Luka in third, the one thing that I kind of think about him is, are they going to win enough to propel him into the real MVP talk? Because without, KP playing and being healthy all year, I'm not sure how well they're going to do. I think they're going to make the playoffs for sure. I think they're going to be a top 5 team in the West. But I think to be an MVP candidate, he would have to get them in the top 2 or 3. And I just don't know if as a team they're quite there yet. So
we talked about this. Now, hold up. Now we brought this up. COVID is going to play a big part of, the way that the conference standings are going to go. In Texas, they're up there as far as like total count because of how big of a state they are. But if you look at their per 100,000, they're not even top in as far as that category goes. So Dallas even and they lost KP, but they also are bringing back Dwight Powell. I know that that's not the sexiest of names, but the fact that they still have a good rotation of bigs, I think is going to end. They got Josh Richardson instead of Seth Curry, excuse me. So maybe defensively they're going to do a little bit more than what we saw last season. So maybe that helps.
Good point. That's a good point. Yeah, definitely. And Luka's kind of trending towards being one of those guys that, is going to win a lot of games no matter who's on his team.
Yeah, look at who they added last season and the lack of conversation that we had of where they were going to go with that roster, right?
Right. And I'm not saying big time first guy you think of that's his team's going to make the not a favorite to take his team to the NBA title or the NBA finals every year, or even the Western Conference finals, but he could be one of those guys where if he's on your roster, a la LeBron James, a la Kevin Durant, a la Kawhi Leonard, he may be good enough for 50 wins a season by himself. At some point here soon. He's legit, other world level player. So he could very well sneak up there a little bit higher than I'm giving him credit for, but I think third in the MVP voting is a good spot for him. I think he's a year or two away yet.
It's not a terrible place to have him third, because I had him fourth last season. So even if he goes to where you're projecting, he's still progressing in his third overall season in the NBA, right?
Right. And, I think that if not the youngest, that would put him right in line with Derrick Rose as one of the youngest MVPs ever. So, they'd be saying a lot. I just think Steph Curry's got the storyline behind him. I think if he's back to 100% and where he was a couple of years ago, top 5 in the NBA in scoring, hitting 353s, blowing people's minds with the kind of half court shots and stuff that he hits, I think he very well could steal a lot of votes and end up walking away with the MVP.
Now, I think that Klay Thompson injury does a lot to hurt those chances, but
I think so too.
My producers, which I don't have, but I'm just going to play. My producers are telling me that right now in the waiting room, we have one of the co-vice presidents of the Off the Ball Network. He is a man that doesn't need an introduction, but deserves one for all the great stuff that he does for our network. He is Mr. Up in Flames. He is a fellow shipmate of mine. I mean that with all due respect. In the Navy, we don't like to call each other shipmate because it's almost a derogatory term. But I mean that in the most respectful of ways. Mr. Mo of the Up in Flames podcast is joining us live here on the show. And I invited him while you were filling in time, because he brought up the point about me saying all those nice flowery things about LeBron James. Mo, thank you for gracing us with your presence, man. How are you doing?
Hey, I appreciate you for bringing me on real quick. But Steven, I can't believe that I actually got to witness, and I thought I might have missed it because I tuned in a little late. So that's what threw me off. I heard the MVPs, and I rewinded real quick. I said, I don't hear LeBron James in my tripping. Like, I thought Austin was a little bit of a fan of LeBron. And then when you said, what, y'all put him in the category of your own, Steven, I can't believe it. You gave LeBron James that much credit. You put him in the category of his own.
Yeah.
Steven, really?
It is what it I mean, dude, it is what it is. I mean, like, it's really hard to argue. Look at how everybody was saying that this team is the biggest threat for literally every step of the way. Everyone was like the Portland Trailblazers because of their outstanding backcourt. That's the one area of defense that the Lakers don't have a guy for, with Avery Bradley not going into the bubble. Demolished them. Oh, well, James Harden and Russell Westbrook, they have great guards too. They can take a stat. They can do better than those other two guys, right? These are MVPs. They're best friends. They have Mike D'Antoni. They got defensive-minded guys on the team too. They threw them out. They didn't even get to see the Clippers, and I picked the Clippers to come out of the West. But, they took the up-and-coming Denver Nuggets, and I don't think that anybody really gave them a fair shake because, I mean, they played over their heads last season. Really, I mean, just being honest, they played over their heads, but they earned it and they deserved it. And then they went against the Miami Heat team that had a couple. You like the Heat, Mo, right? So that they were without a couple of really key contributors to that team. But even at full strength, man, it would have just been so tough for them to go up against LeBron James. I still think that Giannis deserved the MVP because I think that the way the MVP is set up, it is to, not always give it for the greatest player. or the most storied player, but it's designed for the guys who step up statistically. His team did better against the West than LeBron James Lakers did against the East, right? But Mo, listen to this, man. Everybody, you've brought this up. That's why I want to have you here on the show. Everybody has dogged LeBron James for playing in that weak Eastern Conference, right? And then he goes out west. And then what happens? Kevin Durant goes out east. Russell Westbrook gets traded out to the east. James Harden is wanting out of Houston, and all of his teams that he wants to go to are in the Eastern Conference. What's happening, man? Like, I think that he's dispelling this, even at his, quote unquote old age, that it really doesn't matter where you put this man. Like, yes, he does have Anthony Davis, and he's a bad cat. He's a top 5 player in the NBA right now, in my opinion. But LeBron James has proven a lot of the stuff that people had against him in his youth, in his advanced age, wrong. He's just wrong, man.
Yeah, and that's kind of I definitely agree with the fact, everybody kind of ran west. I don't want to say ran west, but you've seen a lot more stars in the Western Conference while LeBron was in the East. Nobody hesitated from signing that big contract, moving from the Eastern Conference to the West. But now, like you said, James Harden wants out Eastern Conference. There's not a single Western Conference team on that list.
Nope.
Kawhi ended up coming to the West, but Kawhi came to make a statement, and I think he wanted to dethrone LeBron James fresh off of winning the championship in Toronto, being the guy, being the number one player. You had your guys like Max Kelly. Kawhi's the best player in the league. So I think, he's never been a guy to run from a challenge, but basically the Eastern Conference ran through LeBron James, and now it looks like even year 18, the Western Conference runs through LeBron James. Like, they won the championship. They're the best team in the Western Conference. They possibly have the best roster in the Western Conference this year, which is crazy how you win a championship and get better. Usually that doesn't happen. And it's going through LeBron James. Like you said, you have to give, I don't want to say that and take away credit from Anthony Davis, because Anthony Davis is a top 5 to 7 player in the NBA. They're hands down the best duo. It's not even close. And AD's going to take the reins as far as, being an MVP caliber player once LeBron James leaves. I think it's a setup, but ultimately is like the West. Now you go through the West, you have to go through LeBron James. And I think that was something nobody could do. Look how good the Hawks were that one year. They had everybody fooled and convinced this is going to be the team to beat Cleveland. Can't do it. Even who else? Toronto was typically the best team in the East. Toronto was typically the best team in the Eastern Conference in the regular season. When they came to LeBron James, they lost in 6? They got swept twice. And these are teams that probably could have went to the finals. You take away LeBron, even on that last year, where they went to the finals. That Cleveland team had no business going to the finals. But I think at that point in time, LeBron just ran the Eastern Conference, and he knew all he had to do was show up to the playoffs. It didn't matter where he was at. And that year showed it. They were the 3rd or 4th best team, I think, at the end of the regular season. So, I mean, LeBron
traded away the whole team at the All-Star break.
Yeah, but LeBron really is in a league of his own. Even in year 18, I still think he's, the crown has to be taken from him. I still think he's the best player in the league. But, just to hear Steven say it, and actually, he means it. He's not just saying it and I concede. He's like, you know what? LeBron really is. And just to hear Steven put him in his own category is very surprising.
It's just hard. Who's the next best guy in the league, Austin, next to LeBron James? Who's the next best guy?
I guess maybe Giannis or Anthony Davis. You could make an argument for either of them. Maybe Luka Doncic. I don't know. It might be James Harden.
Are they as good as LeBron or even close? No. That's why he's on his own, man.
That's what I mean. You could pick any of these guys that we have on this MVP candidates list and say just about they might, they could make a case for number 2, but you put them side by side with LeBron and it's just there's not even an argument to make.
And how many of these guys tried too, Austin, like Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Giannis, Luka Doncic even this year, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, the guys that we had in this next tier. I didn't have Kawhi this high, you did, but you look at him in that light, all of these guys have tried their hand at LeBron and
And I think Mo hit the nail on the head. The East ran through LeBron James, and I think outside of Giannis going to the Mavericks next year or somehow teaming up with Luka Doncic, I think just about every big time star player sees that if they want to win a title in the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to have to go to the Eastern Conference. They don't want to have to go through the Lakers to get to the finals. Anthony Davis has kind of been on lock playing next to LeBron James. We've always known statistically he's great, but we've never really seen him kind of take up that mantle as the guy. And I think he's the perfect, duo guy to add to a duo with LeBron James. And it is funny to see, another thing he hit right on the head is Kawhi Leonard doesn't ever seem like the type of guy that's going to shy away from a challenge. And I think he legitimately did think he was going to go into LA and dethrone LeBron. And
a lot of people did.
And rightfully so. I mean, the last time we saw him before last year, he won the title. He knocked off the Warriors, regardless of how many injuries they had. They were still able to win that title, a title that I don't think anybody thought Toronto was going to win. But at the same time, they were a miracle shot by Kawhi Leonard away from not even making the Eastern Conference Finals.
Exactly.
So a couple bounces here and there, and any of this could be different. But you can't really say that about LeBron James. I mean, he gives his teams the best chance to win a title every single year. Even the year they didn't make the playoffs with the Lakers when he got hurt. Before he got hurt, if you guys remember that Christmas Day game, it was unreal. They were I think they beat the Warriors by like 24 points that game, and they were dominating them at full strength, and they were kind of on a little bit of a streak there. And thanks, Mo, for joining us. I appreciate you coming on.
Just real quick, Mo had technical difficulties. We obviously didn't upset him. He liked everything that we were saying about LeBron James, this guy, right? So no hard feelings or anything from him. He's just having technical difficulty is where he's at right now.
Definitely. And one thing I did want to mention before he jumped off, but I know he's still listening, is I just think having a show with me for so long, it's kind of rubbed off on you a little bit there in terms of your love for LeBron. It's hard not to love the guy.
I mean,
you can admit it, Steven. It's okay. You're a fan.
I'll put it like this. It's the same thing I have Kobe Bryant. Like, I rooted against Kobe Bryant like my whole NBA love and life, but I appreciate the greatness. Same thing with LeBron James.
I was a big LeBron fan. Not a big LeBron fan. I liked him when he was in Cleveland the first time. When he went to Miami, I got swept up in that whole narrative that he was the bad guy and hated him when he was in Miami. And then when he went back to Cleveland, I started to warm up to him. And I can remember where I was when they won that title against the Warriors in 2016. And my roommate was sitting waiting for me to get off work. And he even said that he'd never seen me excited for a LeBron James win like that. And it blew my mind that he was able to beat a 73-win team like that and do what he did and put up the numbers that he did. And I just liked him more and more ever since then. And then it was icing on the cake when he went to the Lakers. But,
it was a foregone conclusion that when he donned that purple and gold that you were going to be all about it.
Exactly. Anthony Davis too. But
it's one of those things, man, where I'm not old. Like, I just turned 30, right? But I'm at the point now where I don't like the MJ versus LeBron discussion anymore. Like, it's tired, man. Let's talk about something that they're the only two guys. They're not the only two guys to ever play basketball, right? Like, that's why I'm saying, like, Kareem doesn't get enough credit, nowhere near enough credit for the amount of work that he's done on every level that he's ever laced them up at. And there's so many other great players in basketball, man. And it's not like I want to take attention away from LeBron. It's just that I don't want to talk about him versus MJ anymore. Like, can we please stop doing that? It's tired. Right. And I don't like Kevin Durant's rings don't mean as much as compared to, like, okay, guys, like, fine, whatever. Like, if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. I'm just tired of the weighted ring discussion. Like, you could argue that KD went to a team full of superstars and ended up being their best player. So, like, what does that mean? Like, you could argue, well, yeah, the job was easier, but also, like, he went to a team that wasn't his and took over, in key moments and was final MVP twice in a team full of stars that they could have went through another route, and they just went with KD because it was the best route to go, right? So, I don't know. I hate the weighted ring. I hate the MJ versus LeBron. Like, let's talk about other guys in the NBA, please.
Well, in terms of the KD to the Warriors thing, I know everybody gets all upset and up in arms because they blew a 3-1 lead to the Warriors the year before. But like you said, he went to a team that had a 2-time reigning MVP and made him the second option. Came in and took over. And he kind of screwed up the math a little bit and made it easier to win a title. But you still have to stay healthy. You still have to get there, and you still have to beat LeBron James twice, and they beat him pretty handily.
And he guarded LeBron James too.
Mm-hmm.
He guarded.
But it's almost a testament though to how great LeBron James is, because we already said every team he goes to, they're almost automatically the favorite. They're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to go deep into the playoffs.
They're going to make the
beyond
final.
that. Look at the roster that the Warriors put together just to beat him. You know,
Dude,
we can talk about how good Kyrie and Kevin Love were, but they weren't there. They weren't there that whole time. And you know, we can talk about how he had Dwayne Wade and how he had Derrick Rose at one point in those seasons, but they weren't the same Dwayne Wade, Derrick Rose. You know, Chris Bosh was there. He's had a lot of great teammates. But every team that's won a championship has been made up of great players. It's just there's hardly any. You know, the Mavericks in 2011 are about the only team that's had one All-Star that ever won a title. I think one of Jordan's teams did it.
Well, no. See, the Mavericks, they had Dirk Nowitzki, who's an All-Star. Mm-hmm. They had Peja Stojakovic, who was an All-Star. And
I just meant an All-Star that season.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was going to say, like, we can run down that list.
Well, they had, believe me, they had a loaded roster, you know, if you look at just overall throughout their careers. But I just meant, you know, that season he was
understand. I'm tracking.
But, you know, Jason Kidd was an all-world point guard. They had, you know, like you said, Peja Stojakovic went on one of the best hot streaks of shooting I've about ever seen in those playoffs. And, you know,
Jason Terry, one of the best 6 men ever.
And let's be honest, LeBron James didn't know how to win then yet. He hadn't figured out how to win a title yet. He didn't really understand what it took. And I think if you look throughout the history of the NBA, multiple time champions have had to overcome some kind of struggle. They don't just come right into the league and start winning. You know, it just doesn't happen. Shaquille O'Neal, the first time he went to the finals, got swept. You know, him and Kobe were together for several years before they won their three-peat. You know, Michael Jordan had to overcome the Pistons. The Pistons had to overcome the Celtics. Okay. You know, it's always, you know, there's like stepping stones. And that's you know, an interesting thing to think about in terms of Giannis Antetokounmpo too, because he's entering year 9, year 8 or 9.
That's crazy.
That's right when Michael Jordan started winning his titles. That's right when LeBron started winning his titles. Yeah. So, you know, he's on pace. He's won 2 MVPs, Defensive Player of the Year, and they've had the best record in basketball 2 years in a row.
And he's gotten better every daggone year.
We may just be, you know, prematurely writing him off as not a Batman type. You know, I hear that all the time, Batman and Robin. You know,
get out.
Maybe he is. I don't think so yet. I don't think he's shown reason to believe that he will be.
He'd be a pretty daggone good Robin. Like I would want to see who the Batman is, right?
Right. Well, the Batman would have to be a Steph Curry, a Luka Doncic, somebody like that. You know, it would have to be somebody that's just not gonna be overwhelmed by having him on their team and not be afraid to kind of take over for him. But you know, there's a lot of interesting storylines surrounding.
And it's hard at his position too, you know, to be that guy and to take over. Like Anthony Davis looks really good being a quote unquote Robin next to LeBron James. It's just hard if you're a big to literally carry your team. It's almost impossible if you can't create on the perimeter, shoot, and get other people open on a consistent basis. It's hard to be your team's best player, no matter how good you are. Look at Shaquille O'Neal.
I was just gonna say, Giannis is like Shaq.
Yeah,
you know. I mean, he's every bit as big. I mean, not physically as big, but he's every bit as tall. He just doesn't play in the post like those guys did.
Yeah. And Kareem had Oscar Robertson and Magic Johnson.
Right. Everybody talks about Kareem, but they don't really mention the fact that he played with the best point guard in history, you know, for a lot of those titles. And you know, that helps. You know, having a great perimeter player, no matter how far back you look, even all the way back to Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell. Those guys had all-star guards with them too. Yep. You know, I mean, Bill Russell's team was absolutely loaded. You almost can't even really compare because
and there were like 12 teams in the NBA.
They played in an 8-team league. Yeah. I think he had 4 Hall of Fame teammates on some of those teams. And, you know, that's the reason they won all the time, because they had all the best players. And I hate to say it, I don't want to sound like a prisoner of the moment or like recency bias, but
let it out, dude. It's late. We can talk about whatever
I think these the guys that are the 7th, 8th, 9th guys on a lot of these teams today in the NBA would be some of the best players in the NBA 20 or 30 years ago.
That's spicy. That's spicy.
I know. I was kind of scared to put that one out there, but I just really feel that way. I mean, I watch a lot.
You think Daniel Tice would be like that dude back then?
I don't know about. Maybe that's saying a little much, but I think he'd be really good. I think he'd do really good.
He'd be like your Will Perdue, you know.
I mean, just like DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan is, to me, more athletic than just about anybody Michael Jordan played against, other than maybe Clyde Drexler and Dominique Wilkins. But, you see guys like that all throughout the NBA now. Gerald Green is as big and as athletic as a Dominique Wilkins was. He can jump out of the gym, and there's 4 or 5 guys like that on every team. And
yeah, my thing is with that whole athleticism thing is like there's guys in the league now that are athletes that are more athletic than the guys who actually are like MVPs. It's one thing to be athletic in the NBA, it's another thing to have that skill. So like I get what you're saying, like there, but to your point, I think that you could look at the top guys in the NBA and compare their athleticism to some of the older guys, right? Mm-hmm. And say that it's like, but now, I mean, Bill Russell, like people forget, like this dude was like, he was also like very freakishly athletic for his time too. Like what could have been an Olympian. Like people don't talk about that a lot. Like could have legitimately been an Olympian in his time. But like I get what you're saying. I'm not as far as like 6th, 7th on the team now back then, but like certainly your top. I think the top guys in any era can compete in any era. Like
I agree. I agree definitely that the top level guys. I mean, Larry Bird's going to be Larry Bird no matter where you put him in history. I think, and same with Michael Jordan, same with LeBron James. Those guys are guys that kind of transcend eras. Yeah. But I just mean like, looking at the Bulls '90s roster, like the sixth man of that team was Judd Buechler. Like,
yeah. We're certainly deeper, I would say. Yeah, we're certainly deeper.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like where in the history of the NBA has there been a Kevin Durant before? And just if you put him in 1965 or 1975, just dropped him into an NBA game, people would lose their minds. Like they wouldn't know what to do. And same
maybe
with kind of
Bird, like that. I mean, I'm like off the top of my head just trying to list guys that are like of that Kevin Durant type.
Mm-hmm. Larry Bird's really the best comparison that you have. And just real quick, a crazy Larry Bird story I heard the other day. Have you ever heard the time where he had a back-to-back and he decided to save his right hand for the next night?
Yeah, he played all left-handed.
47-point triple-double playing left-handed.
Yeah, that's just,
you hear stories like he would come into a locker room at an opposing gym and he'd get the ball boy to find out who has the scoring record in this building because I'm going to break it tonight, and then he'd go out and do it. And I like hearing stuff like that. That kind of stuff interests me.
Yeah, and I love this. Like he would hate when he was guarded by a white player. He took that as offensive, and they kind of brought that up this past season when like Jimmy Butler was being guarded by Duncan Robinson. Like he brought that up, and everyone made that to be a bigger deal than really what it is. Like
right,
amongst friends, conversations are different, right?
Right, and then too like. Something that I've been interested in recently that I've been reading about that I know you've heard me talk about quite a bit, Stephen, is there's actually a mathematical thing I'm reading. It's called The Case for Dennis Rodman.
Oh, yes.
Basically, it's a big, long, huge, like 12-part series about why Dennis Rodman belongs in the Hall of Fame. And I won't get too into it, but one thing that was really cool that I took away from this article is statistically, it's the statistical likelihood of a rebounder like Dennis Rodman coming along. They said the season like he had 94-95 was his best rebounding year in terms of total rebounds, in terms of rebounds per game, rebound rate, any way you want to look at it. They said that a season like that statistically should happen once every 400 years, and that this guy was actually able to like compare how much better of a rebounder he was versus everyone else in the league to how much better of a scorer Michael Jordan was than everybody else in the league.
And just to put this out there, that the NBA was, its inception was in 1949. So yeah, he's a little ahead of that 400-year mark.
And like the guy said too, now that he's come along, the mathematical chance of it happening again like skyrocketed. So we'll never see a rebounder like Dennis Rodman. But they were able to figure out, like, basically he's twice the outlier in terms of rebounding than Michael Jordan was in terms of scoring. And it matches up well because they both led the NBA in rebounding and scoring, respectively 10 times. And so Michael Jordan was like, his best scoring season was like 3 times better than what you'd expect the best scoring season to be. But Dennis Rodman's best rebound season was like 7 times better than the best rebounding season you would expect mathematically, just if you went off of averages. So, this narrative too, that you hear all the time, that Jordan didn't have the same level of teammates that LeBron had, and all of that, it's all, there's a way to kind of disprove all of it. So just the whole idea of Jordan versus LeBron, to me, is pointless. We're never going to see it. We never could see it. They never were in the league together at the same time. They're both incredibly, incredibly talented. Whoever you want as 1 and 2, I can't argue against you. I'm sick and tired of hearing it. Like, I don't even really want to hear any more of these comparisons of now versus the 90s. Like, it's
played out, man. It's tired.
It is. Very. There was one that interested me the other day, and you can't even really make a good argument either way. It's Patrick Ewing and Dwight Howard. Who's the better player? I mean, you can't really tell because the rules were different. They're playing a different game. It's just appreciate what we have in front of us right now. Appreciate the fact that we've got a guy that's going into year 18 that is heading. I mean, every list you've seen, every list, our list, my list, your list, the ESPN list, LeBron's number 1 on all of them. And he's gonna be for
he's
probably
like
another couple of years.
38, if not 38 years old. Like
I think he's 36.
Is he? Okay, yeah. Well, then he's 36, 37, somewhere around that mark. I think that I don't know.
How many 36-year-olds have ever been the best player in the league?
I can't think of a one, right? Like, and he's already has the most all NBA team appearances compared to anybody. He broke Kareem's record last season. And I said coming into the last season that LeBron James, before I just really got tired of it, I said LeBron James is 3rd all time behind MJ and Kareem. And I said that he has a chance to pass, Kareem coming into the season. Now I'm just at the point now where, like, I don't care. Like, he's the best of this era. Like, I mean, let's just leave it at that, like, and there's been some really good players, like, hands down. Right. And I think that the NBA is in good hands too, Austin, with the, the up and coming guys that we have in the league. We touched on a lot of these guys. Your Jason Tatums, your Ja Morants, your Zion Williamsons, your Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Anthony Davis. These are all guys that we're going to have in the NBA for a long time, man. And I just, I don't want LeBron James to be gone yet, but I, at the same time, am also interested to see. It's always weird when the league transitions from like the one face to another of the league. And I'm just very curious. It could be in this next year's draft class with a guy like, Suggs or Cunningham. Maybe they come in and eventually do become that face. I think they're that talented, but it's always interesting when we transition from one time in the league where one guy had his, a death grip on it to where the other guy just kind of takes the reins.
And that's a really, really good point. And it's like you said, it's always interesting to see when the mantle kind of gets passed.
That's when rules change. That's when
how
rules
long
change.
Right. How long's it been since the mantle got passed? I mean, how long has LeBron James been the number 1 guy? For over a decade, about a decade at least.
I mean, Kobe had it for a little bit and then gave it.
Yeah, but you don't really see guys stay that high on that list that long, and like you said, though, eventually it's coming in the next couple of years, but the NBA is in really, really good hands. If you just think 25 and under, here's a list of 25 and under players. Just listen to this. Tyler Hero, Michael Porter Jr., Miles Turner, D'Angelo Russell, Brandon Clark, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, OG Anunoby, John Collins, Domantas Sabonis, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Ingram, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, De'Aaron Fox, Jaylen Brown, Zion Williamson, John Morant, Trae Young, Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, Ben Simmons, Bam Adebayo, Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic. Those guys are
And
all
Giannis just turned 26.
Yes.
So
I mean, just think about those last five I read off: Ben Simmons, Bam Adebayo, Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic. Like
perennial year all-stars, like they're going to be in the MVP discussion for 10 seasons. Like,
and that's not even really mentioning Zion Williamson, who could very well be the best of all of them when it's, before long here.
We're going to have a really good draft class this season too. It just touched on that. There are going to be about 7 guys in this year's draft, Austin, maybe 5 to 7 guys that could have been the number 1 draft pick this last season if you would have just plucked them out and put them in.
And I've actually started trying to up my game to compete with you in terms of draft prospect knowledge. So I'm getting there. I've been working on the top guys, and I mean, going through Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs, looking at trying to find their weaknesses. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to find weaknesses that these guys have. I mean, you really have to nitpick some of these guys, and I think we're about to have another boom in terms of NBA talent. I think we had one in the early 2000s. I think we're in the midst of one right now. And, expansion may be on the horizon. They may go back to Seattle. I don't know, but just pretty soon having 3 stars on a team is going to be kind of
the norm.
The norm. Yep, exactly. So
look at from 03 to like 09, like that stretch of drafts, like you could argue that maybe 2 draft class out of that whole time frame produced some flops and duds, but overall from 03 to 09, like that's like 90% of the top faces of our game.
Right. And then, just look the last few years. We've had, Ja Morant, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Zion Williamson, Jason Tatum. All these guys just got drafted in the last few years. Joel Embiid, he's another one.
Yeah.
And it's just Devin Booker. Devin Booker very well may lead the NBA in scoring this year. He could, legitimately. And guys like Russell Westbrook and James Harden are going to start slowing down in the next couple of years. And these new faces are going to take over. It's amazing to me to think about where Carmelo Anthony is right now versus LeBron James, compared to where they were when they came into the league together. It's just, Dwayne Wade's been out of the NBA for a couple of years already.
Yeah. Chris Paul, LeBron's with the medical stuff.
Right. But LeBron's still on top of the mountain, and his peers there's hardly anybody from his draft even still in the NBA.
Kyle Korver's still not on a team.
Right. And it's just unreal. I mean, the longevity of him being on top is second to none. And I don't think we'll ever see anything like it again. And I just think people need to appreciate it while it's here.
Wholeheartedly agree. Well, Austin, man, like I enjoyed this. This was nice that we didn't have a time limit. We just kind of got to cut loose and kind of get back to our roots a little bit, so to speak, if you will. Just 2 guys that love basketball who also know the ins and outs of it, not just, I like watching this player. I like watching this player. We provide you guys with analytical, data support, all of that, everything good about the game of basketball, man. We try really hard to put here on the show, and we get a lot of compliments saying we do a good job, and it just humbles me so much, man. And I appreciate all you do here for the show, man.
Hey, thank you very much. I love ranting and raving about my favorite NBA players and why I like guys and why I don't. And I can talk about this stuff all night. You just heard me kind of go off on 7 different tangents about LeBron, but this is the kind of and people that are listening need to realize this is what we do when we're not live on here all day anyway. We're always thinking about this stuff. Our VP Jeff kind of put a bug in my ear about, trying to maybe come up with my own advanced stats one day. And I'm looking at it, and it's way mathematically above where I am intellectually right now. But it's something that I like.
About it, you can do it if you care about it. If you care about it enough, you can do it.
There's some crazy smart guys out there on Twitter and on Reddit that are looking into the game of basketball in ways that you and I can't even imagine. And
it's literally rockets. Look at John Hollinger. He got to be a general manager of a team and is now one of the most sought after minds, as far as, NBA media goes. because he invented PER. Like that's his brainchild.
And just to kind of get that out there real quick, I like PER. I like those stats. I think it is a useful tool. But these guys now look at PER like it's nothing. Like it's a bad stat. Like they don't even really relate to it. It's like they have stats like win probability, like win adjusted win probability and wages of wins, and like the on-off stats are just insane, like trying to figure out what the real value of players are. And I do think there's a level where it goes too far, but it's interesting to look at. It's an interesting piece of the puzzle for sure.
Yeah, and we try to bring all of that, the eye test, the analytics, the data, the science, the barbershop talk, all of that. We try to bring all of it here on the show, and it's fun to get to do. And Austin and I we're kind of Iron Manning it right now. We just did a show with Lee Branscombe of hoopsprospects.com. Shout out to Lee, appreciate you, brother. Where we wrapped up draft stuff. And Austin, you just mentioned that you're getting into it more. That's awesome, man. Like that's part of the NBA, and we're gonna keep trying to be the best that we can at this.
I used to have a real love for recruiting, high school recruiting into college. And then it seems like every website you go to now, you have to pay for any of that stuff. So I kind of fell off it for a few years, but from what I've watched of the 3 or 4 guys that I've looked at so far, I'm getting back into it and I'm loving it. And, it's a lot of eye test. It's a lot of eye test right now because there's just not that much out there on these guys in terms of, real competition. Like you said, high school stats are great, but
you got to watch the game in a different way. You can't just watch the game as a whole. Like you have to literally track a guy and like see what he's doing off the ball defensively, and see how he plays like that.
It's amazing that we even live in an era where that's possible. I mean, just 4 or 5 years ago, that kind of player tracking data and the data that like Synergy and places like that have now, it wasn't available. And, even back to what we were talking about with player efficiency rating, like possession by possession stats weren't really that available when that guy created that. And that just blows my mind even more. Like they're able to like model what these stats would have been in the 60s, even though they don't have the information for it. They're able to model within like 1%, of being right, or, within like a 1% accuracy. Yes. And it's unreal. And, like we always say, it's a mixture of the eye test versus the numbers, but you can't
plant your flag in one camp. You gotta take it all into consideration.
Right. And even like what we were talking about with Dennis Rodman, if you look at that, his PER on those Bulls teams would have made him as the 7th best player on those teams. That's where his player efficiency, because player efficiency rating really heavily values scoring. Whereas,
that's the name of the game, is putting the ball in the hoop, right? So
true. But, so is creating extra possessions, and so is, taking away possessions from the opponent. And one of the really cool things that I thought was that I read is almost everybody that's a great offensive rebounder isn't that great of a defensive rebounder, or vice versa. They're really good at one and not as good at the other. Dennis Rodman is like far and away the number 1 offensive rebounder and defensive rebounder of all time. Like,
and he could check your best offensive weapon too.
And it was either Jordan or Pippen said that he's the best on-ball defender they've ever played with. I mean, and there's not a good mathematical way to tell that. And
but what gets him in the Hall of Fame, one of, if not the best player in the NBA, and Michael Jordan went to Las Vegas and knocked on his hotel room door and went and grabbed him because they needed him to win. So like that gets you in the Hall of Fame.
Think about that. You're in between game 2 and 3 of the NBA Finals. You sneak away for an afternoon to go be on WCW with the New World Order on national TV with Hulk Hogan. And then that night you're in a casino with Carmen Electra, and the next morning Michael Jordan shows up at your hotel room to pull you back to Chicago for game 3.
And your body is functioning on God knows what, right?
Right. And then you go into game 3 and I think have 18 rebounds or something ridiculous. It's just it's the stuff of legend. But he definitely, I won't keep talking about it, but he definitely belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Anybody who has ever watched them should.
I think, Steven, I think you belong in the Hall of Fame too. You're a class act. You're a great a great co-host. We do have a lot of fun with this. It was fun to do this and not have to worry about the time and worry exactly about, what we're talking about. We can kind of just ramble.
And I think too, like the fact that we're timed so much, like there were times where we would plan and we would still be talking right now about the stuff that we already covered. Like we've only been on, I say only, we've been on for an hour and 20 minutes.
Right.
And we would have like sat down and set a show schedule and would have gone past this now. So I think
by far.
Right. So
nice to get it out of our system.
Yeah, it's really good just to kind of give this bonus content and kind of, like I said, get back to our roots a little bit. But Austin, man, it's been a pleasure as always to work with you, man. Outside of basketball, is there anything that you kind of want to let the audience know?
Well, I've got my my NFL podcast. It's called Sharp Money Fantasy. It's fantasy football, fantasy, sports betting. That's brought to us by Monkey Knife Fight. They're one of the great affiliates that we have for that show. So definitely go on there and check those guys out. But Scott and I do have a lot of fun with that. And
y'all do great work, man.
I appreciate that. Scott kind of makes me look good on that show. So I try to fill your role of being the host and let him impart his knowledge on the fans, but it's easier said than done for sure. You've got big shoes to fill. And he doesn't make fun of you the way that you make fun of me on top of that, right? True. So you got kid gloves on right now. Just put that. Oh yeah, he'll get there. He'll get there. He's pretty high on his bills, but so am I right now too. So
everybody is right now.
I will say too, for anybody who cares, we did just live stream a fantasy basketball draft earlier today. You can go check that out on Off the Ball Network. There was 4 or 5 guys that were on there. I wasn't on the live stream, but I am part of the draft. So
you had a great draft, man.
Hey, I appreciate that. I think so too. I think, Serge Ibaka was my last pick or second to last pick. So I could have done a lot worse.
Yeah. And that speaks a
lot. I'm excited about it. It was a lot of fun for sure. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if everybody's willing to put in that kind of effort for a whole basketball season. It's a lot of updating your roster and your lineup. So,
but it's a shortened season. There are only 72 games this season.
10 fewer games this time. So
10 fewer games. Well, cool. Yeah. And, we do the See You Sunday show on, it's an exclusive Off the Ball Network show that, that Couch Coach and I kind of co-host together, where we have a rotation of guys and gals circulate in and out. And it's a lot of fun. We'll be up on, Saturday mornings most likely at 11 a.m. Eastern time is kind of our typically air time. So just go to Off the Ball Network on Twitter. It'll stream there. We'll have it stream into my individual Facebook page, into the Off the Ball Network Facebook page as well. And our other vice president, Jeff Hunt, has a lot of stuff in the works. I think we're going to be opening up like a versus style show soon where, we'll debate. Yeah, where I'll try my best to be as, confrontational as possible. But
I'll work on it with you a little bit.
All right. I appreciate it. I don't swear. So, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be perfect. Occasionally I do, but like by and large, I don't. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what route this show takes.
Are you going to be Skip or Shannon?
Man, I don't even know if I can be out. I don't know. Like if I have to put myself in a hole, I probably think I'm probably more like a Colin or a Max, as lame as corny as that sounds. Like that's probably as close as I'll get.
I like Max. I think Max makes some good points. I think Max gets stuck because Stephen A is such a big personality. Max kind of gets stuck taking whatever side that he doesn't take. I think Stephen A kind of dominates that show a little bit. But
he is like the highest paid, entertainment personality that talks about sports. So
yeah,
they got to make him look good.
That sounds like it'll be a lot of fun. I'm excited to see how that goes for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that you'll get an invitation to be on there too. But other than that, go check out offtheballnetwork.com.
Got a lot of great stuff. Argue my analytics for everything.
There you go. Offtheballnetwork.com for all your sports needs. The guys, all the guys on there do a great job. Again, I'll just put a plug for our show. Austin and I, we just recently debuted on Dash Radio on the Nothing But Net channel. Was a lot of fun having Shannon Walsh of the Belly Up Sports Network on there. She's the department leader for the NBA side. And we had her on our debut show, which aired this last Friday. This Monday will be the episode that we recorded today with Lee Branscombe of hoopsprospects.com. And we're on every Monday and Friday, man.
Guru.
Yeah, Draft Guru. He is our Chad Ford, so to speak.
Yes, he is.
You know, we air every Monday and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific, and that's key driving home hours, Austin.
Yes, it is. We somehow landed drive time for our first ever, radio gig. So we're doing something right.
Yeah, and it's a blessing. Like I said, I'm humbled every time someone ever wants to do anything with us.
The fact that we can even get guests to come on this little show that we put together here, I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, we're 30 episodes deep together, by the way. Like I've been doing Breaking the Game with Stephen Gillespie for like almost probably close to a year now. And, but Austin and I, we're only 30 episodes deep working together, which is crazy.
Seems like we've been doing this forever.
Yeah, it feels that way, man. And
time flies and it's easy when you got a good co-host like you. So,
and you too, man. But anyway, Austin, dude. Well, let's as Couch Coach says, let's put a bow on this, man.
Yeah, let's let the people get out of here.
Yeah, but appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. We had to get this out of our system. We had fun doing this project. We put a lot of time, effort, and energy in it. And we want to finish what we started, and it was good just to be able to ramble and not have to worry about saying everything correctly in the right amount of time. So this was basically therapy for us.
It is. You guys are privy to our live counseling sessions that we do every week here. So that's really what it is.
Yeah, and you don't have to pay for counseling, so there you go.
Right, and it's beneficial to our wives too, because we don't have to blow them up about all this stuff that we want to talk about too.
My wife does. She's a sweetheart, man. She tries to she's asked about the show and I'll explain it. And
mine too.
She's actually been on the show before, which was really cool. So
yeah, it was awesome.
She did well. Yeah, absolutely. We got to have the wives on. One day we just need to have Ariel and Brianna on and just do a show together. Start
the show and not tell anybody and just have them on there.
Yeah, that would be so fun. All right, cool. Man. Well,
I'll let you get out. I'll let everybody get out of here. You guys all have a good night.
All right. Well, for you guys, the listeners, the viewers, you guys have been awesome. Austin, you're great as always. Appreciate everything that you do. So for Austin, for me, for the Off the Ball Network, for Dash Radio, for the Nothing But Net channel, for everything in the world of basketball, we have been the Breaking the Game podcast. We appreciate all y'all do. We'll catch up with you guys next time. Much love, everybody.